If you're asking my personal opinion, to keep Cameroon one must be divisible. Because it's a cliche that Cameroon is one and indivisible, because it's not true. Culturally, we are divisible. Language-wise, we are divisible. The law-wise, we have inherited that. So anybody who says Cameroon is one and indivisible is a fallacy. And so we would have to handle that issue very squarely and objectively. And that's what I call the truth. The truth must prevail. There is no doubt that there are people of both sides, that cherish their heritage. And the only way of keeping Cameroon together is to respect the respective heritages that we do have. If you're asking my personal opinion, to keep Cameroon one must be divisible. Because it's a cliche that Cameroon is one and indivisible, because it's not true. Culturally, we are divisible. Language-wise, we are divisible. The law-wise, we have inherited that. So anybody who says Cameroon is one and indivisible is a fallacy. And so we would have to handle that issue very squarely and objectively. And that's what I call the truth. The truth must prevail. There is no doubt that there are people of both sides, that cherish their heritage. And the only way of keeping Cameroon together is to respect the respective heritages that we do have.
Hello, Ambazonians. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening across the globe. Today, I come here to, to continue to encourage Ambazonians globally to continue to fight this fight of our existential. It's an existential threat for all of us. So I also come here to discuss on how the current geopolitics globally ties into our resistance and our struggle to be a free people. Our people, or Ambazonia as a whole, what is happening and what has been happening in Ambazonia is not something that we have to look at it from a localized perspective. We need to look at it from a global perspective. And the way things are shifting in the global space, we need to, as a people, be looking at it and observing and see where the tides are shifting, so that we can be able to really move according to how the current geopolitics globally is moving. What I would say is that to Ambazonian people, we should keep on fighting. The fight for independence is not a one-day thing. It's like a crusade where you fight to the end till you achieve your goal, you achieve your intention. Let me check whether the current what I have currently, whether it's really showing, whether it's coming up, because it seems as if I'm having some technical issues. Let me check and make sure that our screen is on. Just to ensure that we find out. Okay, I think things are good. We are good. So, let me see. Just making sure that. Okay, good. I want to say that when we look at the current geopolitical landscape globally, we notice that certain things are happening, and it directly affects the Ambazonian revolution. We are not living in a silo. We live in a global village, and whatever is happening globally, it affects us directly. Our predicament has been the fact that at one point in time during our independence, we were locked in a war of ideologies, the East and the West. And that is one of the factors that kept us, Ambazonia, enslaved till now. So, with the current geopolitics, we have to measure our level of resistance and shift according to the global currents, how geopolitics is moving. So, there is something that I saw that I want to talk to Ambazonians, and this should give us should really reinforce our fighting for our fight for independence. I want I want to analyze a video that I've seen from the Grandmaster France. The main problem that Ambazonia has is that the Republic of Cameroon is just executing the French dictates for them to continue to maintain their stranglehold and their interests in Africa and globally, because I call France as a leech. Those heads of states that have been implanted and imposed on African countries, and the power that was imposed on La Republic of Cameroon to carry out the current genocide and also to carry out the assimilation project. You know, what we see happening across Africa has been the handwork of France. What we suffer from has been the handwork of France. La Republic of Cameroon is just the slave boy executing the slave master's tasks. So what is happening to the slave master now is strongly going to have a ripple effect across Africa, and us suffering under the French, because Ambazonia suffers under the hands of the French through the proxy, like the political Cameroon, its mentees. So what we see happening to the master is going to take a ripple effect across Africa, and we must keep on fighting and keeping our focus in our liberation. I coined the topic of the video today as Ambassador's resistance must match world geopolitics. France and the EU are not only crying about Ukraine. If you look at it deeply, they are crying on the effect and the after effect of the Ukraine war. I saw a video that I want us to look at and talk about that video. Why our minds must be open, because whatever we are doing in Ambazonia directly ties to the global geopolitics. So let me talk about this video so that we can have a clearer and a better understanding about it. So let me share it and let's talk about it. Now, I saw this video this morning because I do my own personal research on a daily basis to follow geopolitics, because whatever is happening globally affects us directly. You see things are changing. You have to understand why Dr. Yabacho was picked up in Europe. You have to understand why the pressure was mounted on us, Amazonians, the US, during the previous administration. And we have to understand how things are changing and how it affects Ambazonia directly. Mr. France, Norway is doing the bidding for France. Let's be very clear about that. Them thinking that they are going to shake us down by picking up our leader and scare us would dissuade us from fighting for our liberation. We are just like a plantation to the Europeans. And let me play this video so that I'll put context to it, and I'll let you understand the predicament that Europe stands in, and why we Ambazonians must fight to the bloody end. Because at this point in time, the masters of the colonial masters are in pain. They are really struggling. So it is the moment. I mean, their clutches are slowly getting off the hands of their booties. When I say the booties, I talk about African territories and other parts of the world, because of the shakedown that the current president of America, Donald Trump, is doing. Donald J. Trump, his actions is not because he just wants to liberate the global south. His actions is because America is drowning and has been drowning in the current we call it what the current globalist setup. America has been footing the bill for the globalists, and they have been sucked and taken as so how we call it. They have been sucked and taken as mugu. Let me use our parlance, mugu. Someone that foots the bills for others to benefit and fatten them. So this time around, America is trying to survive, and this is a ripple effect of its survival. Those that have been benefiting behind the globalist systems, they are now feeling the pain as America withdraws and caves into realign itself and to build from internally from within, because America was being weakened from within. They would have had a sudden collapse. And what you see Donald Trump doing is not because he loves the global south, but because he's trying to regain his nation, and also all the how do you call it, the leeches that have been leeching off from the American system. They are now crying foul. And I will break it down through this video, and I'll let you understand what I mean by saying that leeches have been benefiting from the largesse of America. America has been footing the bill for the globalist structures since a post-World War, and you see Europeans have been feeding free from America, and now they are crying foul. How does this fit into our own project, our liberation struggle? It's not only going to be Ambazonia, other parts of the world. They're going to they grip, they grasp that this European leeches had on the other parts of the world. You are seeing it being released slowly. Case in point, I'll have to touch on a couple of things happening in Africa, and you will also see the implications of the globalist policies and how it has affected us as Ambazonia, and how with Trump disrupting the globalist agenda, how other parts of the world are being freed from that. He's not doing it because he likes it. Likewise, Russia is not fighting Ukraine because they just like to dismantle the globalist agenda. It's because Russia is fighting for its own survival, because one of the policies that have existed in the globalist agenda is to dismantle Russia into bits and pieces. And you see what's happening in Ukraine is Russia fighting for its own survival. So the ripple effect is that nations globally that were caught up in this cloud of this globalist system that was set up and was, I mean, those people are now feeling free. They have been they have been relieved and released from the claws of the globalist agenda. So let me play this video, and I'll talk to you more about what this young boy, the chief abuser of African states, is talking about here, Mr. Macron. I call him Macron, the ambiguity fellow, speaks on both sides of his mouth.
Ukraine, the Russian threat is there, and it affects the countries of Europe. Russia has become, as I speak, and for years to come, a threat to France and Europe. I deeply regret this.
He is saying that Russia has become a threat to France, I mean to France and Europe. No, let me tell you something, Ambazonians. Russia, through its action to free itself because it's facing an external threat from the globalists, has also realized that the only way that it can demonstrate strength and become a global player for its own survival is by breaking the chains of enslavement in other African nations that was hooked up by France. He is not crying about the Ukraine war. No. Russia has also calculatively been breaking other countries that were under the clutches of the EU and France in other parts of the world, case in point in Africa. So, and France is losing its weight and interest and influence and its interests across Africa. You see how African countries are flexing their muscles to fight back from the evil that the France has been perpetuating in their nations. So when he says this, he's not talking about only the Ukraine war, where Russia is hitting France the most, where it hurts in Africa.
Fear grips Europe as French President Emmanuel Macron delivers a stark warning. Russia is no longer just a concern for Ukraine, but a direct threat to France and the continent. We are entering a new era, Macron declared in a solemn evening address, urging European nations to prepare for a long-term security challenge.
All in all, our prosperity and security have become more uncertain.
Their prosperity, what he means by saying that their prosperity and security has become uncertain, is because, let's be clear about it. The Ukraine war didn't start 3 years ago. It started since 2014. When the globalist agenda, they were dabbling in Ukraine, knowing that they were trying to poke the bear, Russia. And through launching through staging a launch part via Ukraine, via the coup that took place in 2014, they were going to see how they were going to creep into Ukraine, from Ukraine into Russia, because the plan that the Europeans have always had is to the globalists, let me put it this way, the globalists have always had is to break Russia into pieces, and then loot Russia. That has been the long wet dream of Europeans, and specifically the globalists. That's when they staged this coup in 2014 with the intention, you've heard it over and over, high-ranking globalist people talking about breaking up Russia. So how France has been one of those, Macron in particular, and his regime has been one of those big globalists. We've had a lot of globalist, leaders within Europe, but this time around, where they came right to the doorsteps of France, of Russia, France has been a key player. And how has Russia responded? By giving high jabs, heavy punches on France, where it hurts the most, where they just harvest and take free food from Africa and go for good. So Russia has been helping to grant some level of assertion, grant some level of strength for these people in African nations to, take their independence and run with it.
And it has to be said that we are entering a new era. It is not only the Ukrainian people who are courageously fighting for their freedom, but also our own security that is under threat. Indeed, if one country can invade its neighbor in Europe with impunity, then nobody can be sure of anything anymore.
Let's be very clear about it. Russia didn't just get up and invade Ukraine. When we hear of the Minsk Agreement 1 and 2, where both nations, where Russia, Britain and France and Germany sought to solve the problem of Eastern Ukraine, because they were destroying and decimating the Eastern Ukraine is made of Russian-speaking people and their culture. They were destroying the Russian culture, killing their people, shelling them. So they had Minsk Agreement 1 and 2 to try to resolve the problem. We heard during the war, we heard very clearly that Angela Merkel came out openly and stated that they were tricking Russia into the Minsk Agreement. They were not serious about it. Their intention, the Western European intention, was to rearm Ukraine to fight, to try to continue the fighting to destroy the Russian-speaking people in the eastern part of Ukraine. Let's be very clear about it. I mean, heads of states came up openly and stated that and said that their intention during the Minsk Agreement was to dampen the fight, because the Eastern Ukrainians were beating the brakes out of the Ukrainian government. Dampen the fight. Let's not pretend, because they always come with these main media lies by stating that the war started 3 years ago. No, this war started since 2014. Why I'm saying this? Because this really directly affects Ambazonia. The current geopolitics affects us directly. And the only thing we have to see through is to fight, keep fighting, because the globalist agenda that affected us, they are cutting the claws of the globalist agenda. Trump's current administration is not doing it because he loves us. No, he's doing it because he's trying to save his nation. And the fallout of Trump's actions is affecting Europe directly. European nations have been hiding behind America. They are under the globalist agenda to go around the world and exploit the entire world. America was footing the bill. America was carrying the heavy lead. If you even look at NATO, America sustains NATO almost 100%, providing Europe security, and then Europe will go around the world with the globalist framework agenda, bullying other parts of the world, exploiting and extorting them, using the globalist platform to steal and also to bully and intimidate other nations globally. So we also see that with the globalist agenda that was set up for quite some years back, it's one of the reasons why Ambazonia suffer. We suffer under the French, and the French has been gaining its energy, or gaining its how to call it, the courage to continue to punish other African nations, is via the globalist agenda that Trump is dismantling and disrupting. You see Europeans now, they're running around crying and begging because Trump is saying that I'm done with this globalist agenda. He's disrupting the globalist agenda both within the US and also externally. And he's saying that Europeans, you've been exploiting us and benefiting from America for too long. We foot the bills globally and you benefit. Through the globalist agenda, France and its cohorts in Europe, the EU nations, they have been leaning on it and terrorizing other parts of the world, terrorizing Africa in particular. And now that Trump is saying, I'm done with the globalist agenda, they don't have anything to lean on. Even to sustain itself, they can't. And if you look at the way the chess is being pushed on the chessboard, you will see things clearly. Let me continue this video. I'll come to
And
talk
it's
about
the
that.
law of the strongest that applies, and peace can no longer be guaranteed on our own continent. History has taught us this. Beyond Ukraine, the Russian threat is there, and
You see, he says beyond Ukraine, the Russian threat is there. He speaks in a language that people don't understand. Russia has no aggression tendencies within Europe, but Russia is hitting France where it hurts the most. Most of the Francophone countries are gaining the courage and the strength to free themselves because Russia is giving them the tools to fight for the heart and soul of their nation. Case in point, the AES nations. They had the guts, they had the audacity and the strength to combat and push out France because Russia gave them the military strength, gave them the military strategy to be able to tell France to leave their country, push them out from all the stealing and robbery that have been robbing those countries. That is what he is crying about. So he talks about Russia here. It's not just about the Ukraine war. Russia doesn't have any intention of threatening its other nations. They are Chihuahua states to fight to begin with. They are the ones that have been provoking Russia. Their heads of states have openly stated that we were lying to Russia about the Minsk agreement. Our intention was to rearm Ukraine and continue to kill the Russian-speaking people in the eastern part of Ukraine. That was what Angela Merkel openly said about two years ago. So let's be clear about this. He's talking about their own security. Russia is not threatening anybody. They have killed a lot of French mercenaries and a lot of French soldiers in Ukraine, disguised as Ukrainian or instructors or Ukrainian soldiers to fight Russia. They have killed a lot of them. You have not seen any Russian soldier or fighters fighting in France, but France has put in soldiers and troops in Ukraine, and Russia is picking them out like butterflies and decimating them. Even recently, just yesterday or 2 days ago, there was a bomb that Russia threw, a Iskander strike. They hit a particular hotel that was full with the French mercenaries in Zelensky's hometown. Let's be very clear about this. Don't buy to this. He is crying because the best way that with the globalist agenda collapsing, Russia, and Trump is collapsing the globalist agenda. Russia also fighting Europe and France. It's not only fighting in France, in Europe. He is not fighting Europe in Ukraine only. Russia is also giving hard jabs on France in Africa. Recently, about a week ago, not up to a week ago, the president, when did that used to happen a couple of years back? Never. The president of Guinea-Bissau visited Russia to have bilateral talks with Russia. The president of Chad has visited Russia to have talks with Russia on security matters. Not talk of the three AES nations. Russia grants them support and cover. And one thing I would say is this very clearly. Some people have been saying that, oh, Russia is some sort of the next colonial master. No. Africans have had a history with Russia. The Russians helped the Southern African nations to fight colonialism in the Southern African states. After that, Russia packed its bags and left. They never stayed there to dictate how those people are supposed to live or dictate or impose themselves on them. So Africa has a history. We still have a mind of history of our own to know who our real partners are, who are people who respect their end of the deal, and those who have been exploiting Africa for the past over 300 years and still exploiting us, putting a chain on our neck. Look at this dude. This is a dude that was telling our African countries how to live, how many kids they need to have, look, lecturing us. That's been the problem in Africa. This guy, we suffer in Ambazonia because of France. We are a project to them to continue to strangle us and drain us using the Republic of Cameroon as a proxy. Let's be clear about it. We had no agreement with the French before and after our independence. We're dragged into this mafia, into this enslavement via the cooperation accord that was signed with the Republic of Cameroon. Ambassador still always remember we have a boundary, an international boundary. Secondly, remember there is no treaty that binds both of us together with these people. They are not like us. We are not like them. This is their master crying because they are cutting his claws around areas where he has been feeding and getting fat for a very long time.
It affects the countries of Europe.
He warned that Moscow is strengthening its military at an alarming pace, planning to add 300,000 more soldiers, 3,000 tanks, and 300 fighter jets by 2030.
Why should Moscow not do that? Moscow should do that because French soldiers are in Ukraine. British soldiers are in Ukraine. German soldiers are in Ukraine. Polish soldiers are in Ukraine. They are fighting in Ukraine, not supporting Ukraine. Russia's intention in Ukraine has been to protect the Russian-speaking nationals in Ukraine. It's in part of Ukraine that was being bombed by the Banderites, the Nazis from the western part of Ukraine. And they were being egged on by the Westerners, Europeans. Let's be clear about that. That is the bottom line. That's what has been going on in that area, in that country. Don't mind the lies that they've been peddling around. It's just like in our own situation. Russia is playing the role that Nigeria would have been playing to protect Ambazonia. Nigeria would have stepped in to say that you need to stop bombing these people. That's just the same analogy that I can give. You'd have expected a nation of Nigeria, if they were standing on their own, to step in and stop Liberia Cameroon from bombing or killing our people. But no, they connived with Liberia Cameroon because, and that's only, and especially when France went to visit, this Macron went to visit Buhari. That's when, after that, they picked up our people and sent them back and sent them to the Liberia Cameroon dungeon to be languishing there. Let's be clear about their intentions in Africa has never been good for us.
Russia continues to rearm, spending over 40% of its budget for this purpose. By 2030, it plans to further expand its army, adding 3,000 soldiers, 3,000 tanks, and 300 fighter jets. In this context, who can believe that today's Russia will stop at Ukraine? Russia has become, as I speak, and for years to come, a threat to France and Europe.
No, the threat to France and Europe that he's talking about, people, it's not a military threat to France and Europe. Russia is clipping up the claws of the French wherever they are in Africa, where they have been stealing and robbing Africa. The best way to fight their enemy, you fight it asymmetrically also. The asymmetrical war that Russia has been fighting, specifically France, is releasing the slaves that France had in Africa, releasing them and setting them free. Let's be very clear about that. We should see France is struggling to survive in Europe, and he's talking of trying to arm itself, to prep itself to gain. Look at Burkina Faso. Look at the case in point, Niger, where they were supplying France. The highest place where France was getting is on nuclear raw materials. They didn't even have. Niger never even had lights in their country. They were buying lights from Nigeria and a neighboring country, but they were getting the best raw material for that lights up France and more than half of Europe from Niger. It's not pure evil. You see evil staring at you and looking at you in front of you. He is crying. Look at how Niger, look at the case in point. Those three nations are about 10 years ahead of where they are now. The AES nations, 10 years ahead of where they are. Military-wise, financial-wise, development-wise. This is why he is crying, because their thievery, their robbery of African nations is coming to an end. Russia is clipping up their hands across Africa. It started by, France was supporting. Uh, France was supporting. France was supporting at one point in time. They were supporting. They were supporting the Seleka rebels in Central African Republic, who were trying to overthrow the government of Central Africa. And this dude, the president, they had no support anywhere. He went to Russia and pleaded. Russia sent their paramilitary group Wagner. At one point, about 4 years ago, Ambazonians, you remember when you saw some guys leaving Central Africa and coming and handing their weapons over in the eastern part of Cameroon, weapons, small jeeps and cars, and surrendering to Republic of Cameroon. We were like, what's going to their soldiers in the eastern part? They were running and coming to the eastern part of Cameroon. We're asking ourselves, what's happening there? Those were Seleka rebels that were sponsored by France to overthrow the government of the Central African Republic. And when Russia came there, within 3 weeks, they took over more than half those Wagner group, more than half of the territory that was controlled by the rebels, and they were flushing them. They had to start running away for their lives, and coming into our territory. We didn't know what was happening, but that was the truth. That was what was happening then, because Russians came in there and then they freed. Did you hear that noise happening again in Central Africa? No. That's when you saw the country like you saw Mali took notes, and Assimi Goita, in order to free his nation, he needed a hammer behind him. He seized power, pushed out the French stooge that was there exploiting their country, and they pressed hard. You heard the French were the ones attacking Mali the most. Their defense minister saying all sorts of crap. They are the ones running to the AU and telling AU to sanction Mali, kick them out of AU, going to the ECOWAS, telling them to punish them. Can you imagine how deeply involved the French were in Mali? How deeply involved, because they were stealing resources from Mali. They were stealing, and that young man said, enough is enough. So when they pushed them all out, they were going to pitch camp in Niger to launch a counter to push this guy out. Smart enough, he pulled a very fast one. As the French military was disbanding from his country, he brought in the Wagner group. And that's where they hear the French started crying deeply. Why I put all this information is to tell Ambazonians that we are in a very interesting time. We should fight and not lose focus. Fight like never before. We are in a very interesting time globally. The current geopolitics is on our side, is in our favor, not intentionally but coincidentally. So let me continue with what this young man is crying and talking about. He's crying. He's not started crying. He will cry and cry and cry some more.
I deeply regret this, and I am convinced that in the long term, peace will come to our continent with a Russia that is once again at peace. But the situation I'm describing is just that.
The French leader described Russia's influence war as extending far beyond conventional battlefields, warning of threats in the air, social media, and cyberspace. His speech carried an unmistakable sense of urgency, calling on European nations to reevaluate their defense policies before it's too late.
You know very well that European nations have been sucking a lot of, let me see. It seems as if the video is not playing. Let me pull up the video. I think the video wasn't coming on. Let me pull up the video before I continue talking, because it's very important that we keep on laying things properly. We listen to what he's saying, and
Macron made a bold proposition, extending France's nuclear deterrence to protect European allies. As the only EU nation with nuclear weapons, France has long maintained an independent deterrent. However, amid increasing Russian threats and growing concerns from Germany and other European states, Macron signaled a shift in doctrine. The French president pointed out that his administration had already doubled the military budget over the past decade. But with Russia ramping up its military spending, allocating over 40% of its budget to defense, Macron insisted that Europe must respond accordingly.
So in this time of action that is finally opening up, France has a special status. We have the most effective army in Europe, and thanks to the choice made by our elders.
when he talks of effective army in Europe, what the brigades that French trained and sent into Ukraine were crushed within days by the spectacular Russian forces. It's just a noise that the French people make. The robbery, the theft, they can only talk, bully small African nations. They have been leeching off. I think the point you hear France crying the most because Russia is hitting France where it hurts. As the years go by, you will see most of those African nations asserting themselves that is under the clouds of this clown in the name of France. You see most African nations asserting themselves. Ambazonians, we have to fight like never before. They are losing their grip on the entire continent. Where they have been stealing and robbing us, they are losing their grip. And because they have to struggle internally, and they don't know how, they'll try to use extreme other measures to fight externally to maintain their economy. So the struggle is not just them focusing on where to gain their resources, but also struggling from within to maintain their economic structures. So we as Ambazonians must put extra effort to push the French people out of our country. And if the French, La République du Cameroon had people with guts, like the young guys in Burkina Faso, people who know what it means to have a nation, a state of themselves. If they can mature a little bit like the Omniobes, the Francis Wanchis, where are they in La République du Cameroon? Where are they to seize this opportunity and take their country, take the destiny of their country into their own hands? We need them to stand up at this moment. You see their own, La République du Cameroon see their other brothers and sisters across Africa taking their destiny into their own hands. Senegal kicking out France and making sure that they own the outcome of their nation. They build their nation from within organically. La République du Cameroon is one of those last hops that I think if they were even having the courage, like their own, I can call it what, their own people who were fighting for the genuine independence of La République du Cameroon, if they even had that bold courage, this is the moment where they would have stood up and seized their country. Look, no matter what, I feel so sorry for La République du Cameroon. Whether Ambazonia goes free, when we leave them, if they don't change course, they will continue to drown like you drown in your own blood. This should have been the best moment where their colonial master, the guy that has put them on chokehold, is suffering. This should have been the best moment where we see the Francis Wangis and the Omniobes within Liberia, Cameroon rising up. Not that they never had people who could rise and fight for them. This could have been the best moment for them to rise up, stand like people who have, some element of decency. Stand like people who have some courage and fight for their nation. Let's hear what their slave master is talking
After the Second World War, we have nuclear deterrence capabilities. This protects us much more than many of our neighbors. What's more, we didn't wait for the invasion of Ukraine to take stock of a worrying world. And through the two military programming laws,
And you hear them talking about nuclear deterrence and nuclear war. They have been stealing and robbing that raw material from Africa. And they're keeping that country as one of the most poorest countries. Look at Niger now, how Niger is developing rapidly. They are developing very rapidly. He talks of nuclear deterrence or nuclear whatever. They were stealing and robbing that country and dumping nuclear waste there and having no pity for them. That's how evil these people are. Just how evil France is. That's how evil these people have been to our people as a continent. They put us in this chokehold, Ambazonia in this chokehold. We suffer because they were part of the fraud that kept us under bondage. These are the people that have masterminded the struggle for assimilation of our people. The beginning of the end of this abuse is now.
that I decided on and that successive parliaments have voted for. We will have doubled the budget for our armed forces in almost 10 years. But in view of the threats posed by this acceleration I have just described, we will have to make new budgetary choices and additional investments.
What war has France ever won? Being honest. Except when they come and terrorize African nations. What war have they ever won? First World War, they were liberated. And part of thanks to some of our ancestors in Africa went and fought to free them. Second World War, they were still liberated. They took them. Germans took just not up to a year to squish them, to squash them completely. Which war have they ever won? The Indochina wars, they were beaten and chased out of that place. What forces do they have? When you talk about making the Algerians, they beat the living breaks out of them and chased them out of their country. What war have they ever won except they go around bullying and benefiting from the globalist structures that was put in place, the globalist agenda that has been existing since post-World War? These are leech nations, EU in particular, that have benefited the most from the globalist agenda. And you see, because it has been drowning America financially, Donald Trump is breaking all the globalist structures within the US and out of the US and telling European nations to stand on their own and stop leeching off from America. You'll see the push that's coming on. Let me finish this video if I talk about what I want to say.
Which have now become indispensable. I have asked the government to work on this as quickly as possible.
Addressing Germany's call for an extended nuclear umbrella, Macron reassured allies while maintaining that any nuclear decision would remain firmly in French hands.
This week, we're hosting a free...
Fellow Ambazonians, let me say this. I want to say this.
Nuclear deterrent protects us. It's complete, sovereign, French from start to finish. Since 1964, it has explicitly played a role in preserving peace and security in Europe, responding to the historic appeal of the future German Chancellor.
France has not played any role in maintaining peace in Europe. America has. America has been footing the bill for NATO since after the Second World War till today. America has been footing the bill. America has been leading the NATO forces. America has been paying all the bills for the NATO forces. What is he talking about that he's that France has been maintaining some level of protection in Europe? What protection are we talking about? Stop telling that lie. It's America that provided all the necessary protection to the Europeans and prevented them from cannibalizing themselves. Because they are let me put it very clear. Europeans are savages. Leave them by themselves, they'll cannibalize each other. They are always fighting. The First World War occurred in Europe by themselves. They are tribal wars, and they dragged the entire war into it. It's not long after the Second World War. I can say that America has been in Europe after the Second World War to keep them from tearing each other apart. And I'm betting you, let America walk out of Europe and move out of Europe. EU is going to disintegrate, and within the next 20 years, there will be a major war amongst themselves. The President of America has stopped them from fighting each other. They're always looking for each other, looking for a stick to. They have a stick to always look for each other to club each other on the head. And as America has been there, they have been benefiting under the globalist agenda, robbing Africa dry, using the so-called structural adjustment plan. Areas in Africa where they want to some sort of develop or advance, France comes in and decimate that area, particularly the Francophone areas, and keep them subservient, using other unscrupulous processes. Let Trump continue. I'm not saying that Trump is doing this for our own benefit. No, we are going to benefit from the realignment of the global geopolitics. The only thing ambassadors need to be doing is to fight, because the master that France, the master of the Republic of Cameroon, things are not going right, and the Republic of Cameroon, this is the best moment for them to seize their nation from these clowns.
I have decided to open the strategic debate on the protection of our allies on the European continent by our deterrent. Whatever happens, the decision has always been and will remain in the hands of the President of the Republic, head of the armed forces, controlling our destiny, becoming more independent. We need to work on this both militarily and economically.
Macron's warnings were met with swift and scornful reactions from Russian officials. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev mocked the French leader's speech, ridiculing his concerns about Russia as exaggerated and irrelevant. Medvedev wasted no time in dismissing him. Medvedev posted a tweet on X where the message read, "Russia has become, as I speak to you and for years to come, a threat to France and Europe," says Macron. Macron himself poses no big threat, though. He'll disappear forever no later than May 14th, 2027, and he won't be missed. The former Russian president, now deputy head of Russia's Security Council, has been known for issuing provocative threats to the West, including warnings of nuclear strikes on London. His remarks reinforced Moscow's consistent message: Europe should not expect Russia to back down. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova also took aim at Macron, delivering a sarcastic response. Macron's speech turned out to be truly spring-like. She continued her attack, mocking France's military strength. It has now become clear that the strongest army in Europe belongs to Emmanuel. But Zelensky says it's his. It's very important that these two have found a common activity in measurement. Zakharova also raised questions about diplomatic relations. Despite Macron's speech portraying Russia as an enduring enemy, France is still sending a new ambassador to Moscow.
The most
Fellow Ambazonians, like I say, we're living in very interesting times. God is on our side. God is on our side of Ambazonia. This is the moment where we seize our destiny into our own hands. whenever we started fighting this revolution, we're always saying that it's a God-ordained fight, a God-ordained fight. You know, the planets are aligning. Geopolitics is aligning on our favor. Things are falling on our side. Let me say this. Trump is not doing what he's doing because he likes us. You know, when I see people are fighting for their own interests, I look at what is going to benefit me and I fight for it. The wall is a wall of interest. Some of my friends were saying, "Oh, you voted for Trump." No, I voted for Trump because I had first seen what he can do during his first term. Do I like all his policies? No. I love and I hate bits and pieces of his policies. But in totality, if some of the things that he is doing is going to help Ambazonia be free, I'm all for it. Do I like all what he does? No. What's my interest in his presidency? Him recoiling. Let's be very clear. He's the one that kicked Cameroon out of AGOA. He's the one that kicked them out. And that's when that's one of the factors that has strangled Cameroon's economy. Let's be very clear. Since Donald Trump's tenure in office, Cameroon has been suffering economically. Them not being under the umbrella of AGOA has affected them. Thanks anybody who will hit my enemy hard, I stand with him. He might not do it because he likes us, no. But at the end of the day, if he benefits Ambazonians, fine and good. That's why I stood and I was like looking at the trend of events. Now he comes and he's withdrawing himself. America is withdrawing himself. Donald Trump is withdrawing himself from the world, not because, and you see the fallout, not because he's just doing it. He's trying to save his country. He's trying to save America. America has been footing the bill for freeloaders like Europe globally, and they have been the ones paying the bills. NATO, they pay nearly everything about NATO to provide them security. Security over things I don't know. Let's say during the Cold War, NATO was relevant. But what is NATO relevant for? And why should America be spending all the hundreds of billions of dollars in Europe? And the fallback is that all that money that is spent in Europe, it benefits the European economy. It benefits them. They are capable of hiding under the umbrella to go around bullying other people or other parts of the world, the Europeans. As Trump begins to pull the plug off, and there's a threat that he might even leave NATO, holding them accountable to pay. They have been freeloaders. Even in the trade wars, in trade, Europe has been benefiting a lot from America. And Trump is telling them to pay to go even with them. All this shakedown that Trump is giving, it is rattling them. Their grip is losing. They are taking that slap from Trump. And at the same time, Russia is also countering people like France that have been a proponent of trying to dismantle Russia or to disrupt Russian affairs. It's countering them in Africa. That's why you see Macron crying the most. He is countering them in Africa by helping African nations to gain their independence, their genuine independence, pick the ball by themselves and take care of their nations. The Traorés, the Assimi Goïtas, the Tianis. You see the likes of the guy in Senegal. Why do you think that all of these culminated all around the world during the Russia-Ukraine war? All of them happened during that period of time. Chad had the courage to tell France, get out. These other nations had the courage to tell France, get out. Because Russia has navigated and shielded their economy in such a way that you cannot hurt them. And they are truly independent now. There are other centers of power growing around the world. How can we leverage this within Ambazonia and fight for our freedom? We have to continue to put in the fight. France is losing its grip. And as we fight and continue to bankroll the Republic of Cameroon, they will disintegrate from within. We need to see, it's just that we are dealing with some blockheads in the Republic of Cameroon. This is when they sit and look at their other little brothers and sisters across Africa taking charge of their country. What are they thinking? This should be the best moment when their master is weak to strike back. Get all the NS1s, the Umnobes and the rest. Get all of them out and say, oh, it's time for us to take our nation in our hands. They should stand, let people have some dignity and fight for their own nation. As we continue to bankrupt them, their master is also not feeling fine. Their economy has been affected by Ukraine war. Now Trump is calling them to put in more money if they need America into that whole thing. Trump is saying that you have to now pay for what you eat. They are economically disadvantaged at this moment. They will be struggling to fix their country from within. And this is an opportunity where these Francophone countries should seize control of their country and move ahead. The Republic of Cameroon is still sleeping. This is where they would have taken control of their country and their destiny than keep on staying under their slave master. But to the Ambazonian people, I put in this video because I wanted to show you something. France is crying because Russia is helping other Francophone countries in Africa to dislodge France from their backs. If I can tell you that the interest, the amount of freeloading, the freebies that they have been having in Africa, how much they are losing and they'll keep on losing, and how it's going to affect them in future, how devastating that is, you will not believe it. Trump is there to dismantle the globalist agenda, all the globalist structures that were put in place, that the countries like France that have benefited from it, creeping under the globalist structures, exploiting Africans, putting a chokehold on us, and nobody was saying anything. Now Trump has said everybody for himself. I will tell you this: America will go where America's interest is. The issue of non-spoken spheres of influence is over. That's why you hear America will go, Trump and go and discuss with Russia on Ukraine without the EU's there, without the Ukrainians there themselves. America will go where his interest is. And that is the new order in this world. The issue of spheres of influence, the era of spheres of influence is over. Don't be surprised, America will walk into areas where France thought they had influence in and have a discussion, discuss business with the people. If it works, and they get out of the area. That is the fear that France is facing. That's the fear of the EU. They have been freeloaders under the globalist agenda. They have been freeloaders. America foot the bill. They just go and profit and harvest and leave. Now, Trump is saying you have to eat where you invest. That is their fear. You see them panicking. It's because the era of freeloading is over. The era of freebies is over. So what do we do, Ambazonians? Keep fighting. Because as the master is losing grip and losing its head, it's been weakened within the continent. It is time for us to put in the fight harder. Fight as bankrupt like Cameroon as much as we can. Wherever we have any space or any source of economic, economic benefit in our territory going to Liberia, Cameroon, we cut it. We cut it. Wherever we have any source of economic exploitation going on in our territory into Liberia, Cameroon, let's cut it. That's how you strangle and starve Liberia, Cameroon. And they continue to disintegrate. Look at their state, the state of their roots, their nation. I used to say that what? We are not like them. They are not like us. Look at their state. It is disintegrating because their master is not well. Who rules that country? Look at the hygiene nature of that country. Liberia, Cameroon is dirty in and out. It's a sick nation. Like I said, Ambazonia, we developed our governance from an organic setup. That's why we survived and existed today and keep on fighting. Theirs was handed over to them. As their matter is sick, they are crumbling very easily. So all what we have to do is to mount and increase our resistance, targeting economic infrastructures, disrupting it. And the best Liberia can do to itself is to seize their nation, take over the destiny of their country, and be able to govern themselves by themselves. Their master is sick. They have bigger problems, bigger economic problems. It's for them to take over their own country because we will not stop. We'll keep on fighting. Ambazonians, let's keep on fighting. And all we have to do is to focus our attention a lot on economic strangulation of like for the Cameroon. Any benefit that's coming, timber or whatever, we keep on cutting it. A revolution is like a wave. We mount it high, we rest, we keep on going, but we never stop. One thing about us to understand is that we are not like them. They are not like us. We build from within. Just they handed it to them. That's why it's just like feeding a square peg in a round hole. But we build block by block, piece by piece. Ambazonia was created from an organic system, taking into consideration every aspect in our nation. That's why we survive even without arms. We survived the oppression, the repression, the destruction, intentional destruction of economic structures. We survived because the concept was laid down very clearly to us as Ambazonians. We had a nation 60 years, and after onslaught for more than 60 years, we are still living with the blueprint that our ancestors handed to us. And that's what makes us fight for, because we know it was good. Don't you lose track in that. Don't you lose track of that. We keep on fighting. We keep on supporting this revolution wherever we are or wherever we find ourselves till we are free. The master is sick. Russia is weakening and cutting the brakes off its feet. It's beating the shit out of France. Not only in the Ukraine war. France is suffering economically. Secondly, Trump is dismantling the globally set up structures where France and the European nations were benefiting from for free. So you see it happening. Don't you give up, fellow Amazonians. The masterminder of our oppression is sick. And they are losing the grasp. Where their energy was coming from is being decapitated from the globalist setup. Also, putting their feet from below. All we need to do, Amazonians, is to keep on fighting. Fight for what we believe. We are on the right track. We live in very interesting times. The master of our oppression is suffering. And they'll keep on suffering till their statehood sinks. Fellow Amazonians, I bring this geopolitics to tell you people how things are shifting. Administrations change, perspectives change, how they see the world changes, and we see the benefit of a change in administration. Indirectly, there are things that are happening that is beneficial to Americans as indirectly beneficial to Ambazonia. All we need to do is to keep on fighting. Keep fighting. Never give up. We have come this far not to give up, but to continue to fight. Fight the enemy. Before I end this, I want to say kudos and thanks to the ADF forces in Donga. A few days ago, excuse me, they disrupt and dismantled a checkpoint. I mean, a terrorist coming to kill our people. Along the Bui axis also, our defenders, the nationalist forces around Wainama, dealt a heavy blow on the enemy forces. We continue fighting non-stop till our land is free. The times are on our side. We shall be free by any means necessary. Thank you.